in the chat and I'll find moments to come in and answer them, because this is really a dialogue. And if any of you want to run Moran privately and she'll voice your question, then that's fine as well. So good evening, everyone. I just realized two things as Moran was introduced. Actually, Dustin, one, I missed the cutoff of Edge by 1 year, so I should officially be kicked out. I'm an old timer. I just turned 43 last month.
I had some exceptions, so let's talk after the webinar.
Thank you. So I just still hang around, yes. And the other thing is I'm excited that since that bio was written, I've actually worked with over 1,000 VCs, startups, accelerators, and Silicon Valley giants like Facebook and Google. What's another 500, right? So I moved to Silicon Valley 5 years ago after living in Israel for many years. I've kind of split my life back and forth. And I've run some co-events with IAC and Icon, partnering. I'm Icon's sponsor for all their messaging and storying, and we run Icon Women in Tech. So yeah, that's enough about me. Now let's talk about you. So this presentation, and again, I'm kind of like curious, IAC finds things, they know things. So this is not usually a webinar that I give. This presentation was created exclusively for the Icon conference and the Icon Insiders conference last year. It's based on a series of articles that I wrote, and it's based on investor meetings and presentations that I had the distinct pleasure of watching like a fly on the wall. And I learned a lot, and I hope that you guys will learn some things as well today as I give you my insights. Usually with the webinars, I like to train on actual pitching and storytelling, but this is kind of going to give you some more insights into inside the head of the investor. So this is a juicy topic. There's a lot of questions. This is a completely private zone. As far as I know, this is not being recorded. And like I said, you can anonymize your questions. So feel free to ask the things that I will answer to the best of my ability. So, you know, oftentimes, who here, by the way, who has a startup, is raising funding? How many people? We have, okay, so we have a few here. So, you know the feeling, you walk into an investor meeting, you walk out and you're excited and you're like on top of the world because they're like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome, this is so cool, this is so amazing, we're totally gonna do this, we're totally gonna run with this. And you're like, okay, the money's in the bank, I can start, you know, recruiting people. And you're like swimming in money, you're ready to go, you're raring. But the problem is, what they might really be thinking is very different than what they say, especially in Silicon Valley. Sorry guys, can you mute out unless you're talking to me, because there's kids in the background and dishwashers and dogs barking. Thank you. So why does that happen? Why are they saying one thing? And especially, like I started to say, Silicon Valley investors, it's notorious. So the thing is, nobody ever wants to be the one to say no. So they'll use the whole Silicon Valley hype of the yes, amazing, awesome, fantastic, terrific, great, and then you won't hear from them until you might have hit like a major traction point. So it's really important to understand how to really speak to them in a pitch. Listening in on the things that they actually would never say to your face. And at these specific pitch meetings, there was an opportunity for them to get very direct feedback, and I sat there scribbling furiously. So I've divided this into 8 different types of comments that they've made. I'm happy to share my slides afterwards, so you can just, I'll send it over to Dundee, and she'll make sure you guys get the PDF version of it. So the first type of comments that I want to talk about are the sharing the traction. And I put this first because I want you guys to understand how crucial it is to let them know that you have traction. So this is a quote from one of the investors. He said, as investors, we look for exceptional strength in a company. Your traction is just that. Put it at the beginning. We built it. It's working. Here's how. And in VC land, we say that the best companies will lead with an MRR slide, or MRR, your monthly recurring revenue. So a lot of the startups that were pitching in these various events had a golden nugget. They had just closed a major contract. They had just closed a round of funding. Something great was happening. And very few of them put it front and center. Like it would be on like slide 8, 10, and then the investors would be like, why did you wait till now to tell us that? So I call this the brag slide. This is usually something I would put at the get-go for a round A and upwards step, that as a must. But if you have something exciting, don't wait to tell it. Announce it up front. Get them excited about it. I mean, they know how difficult it is to close a deal. They know how difficult it is to raise a round of funding, to get good press, to have a big partnership. And it's not being empty words or just bragging if it's the truth. So go ahead and lead with it. And even if it's small, they can see that it can convert to much bigger numbers. So bring it front and center. So numbers make them believers. So sometimes you might be speaking to investors that don't necessarily believe in your market. They don't get it. They don't put it in their investment thesis. But if you have the numbers to persuade them of the kind of traction that you had, whether it's revenue, hopefully recurring revenue, they love recurring revenue. That's why everybody's moving to subscription models or as a service model. It could be engagement levels. It could be repeat customers. It could be monthly active users. It could be so month over month growth. Whatever it is, the numbers are going to make them believers. And the more clients you have across more industries, the better that will be for them. Any questions, please put them in the chat, and after each one we'll stop. So those are the main things I want to touch on in showing traction. Put your numbers front and center, show engagement, show traction. Don't wait for the end to brag. Any questions so far on that? Great. Let's move to the second batch, and that's addressing the market and the trends. So again, we come to our friends numbers and investors live and breathe numbers. It's not necessarily, you might be doing a lot of good in the world. They don't really care. They want to look for their investment. I'm sorry if anybody out there is an investor, but let's tell the truth. It's nice to have a double bottom line, to be doing impact, but at the end of the day, they also have partners to answer to, and they really need to be able to talk to them in numbers as well, and showing potential ROI, showing major exits. So talk to them with numbers, look at the huge market potential. It's not just your TAM, SAM, SOM. You must be able to look at your market size and your share of it. You could do bottom up, you can do top down. It's always best, I find, to show the market as, you know, what is your total addressable market? Who are all the people that if everybody was using your product in, let's say, the US, I think global would be too much, but a specific segment, what's their value or what's their total amount? And then look at the SAM, the serviceable market. So which segment of that are you going after? So if you're targeting millennial parents in the US, and there's 81 million of them, but then you're going to target those that are in big cities. So New York, LA, San Francisco, and Chicago. And then you want to get even more specific with your target market. We're going to start with those that have a dispensable income of 150K a year plus. So find that segment, and that's your initial target market, but you're showing how you could reach into bigger markets. So they want to be excited about the opportunity of growth, even if right now you are focused on a very specific market. They want to see that you do have the potential to grow into a multi-billion-dollar market. Markets and trends, you want to set the context. So what's the broad theme that you're providing? Why are you going to be a massive company? What are the trends that are happening? Are there X billion dollars moving into your space in investments, in spending? Maybe there's massive fragmentation in your market and you're going to be the one that consolidates a solution to you. What type of solution is missing in your market? Why have all your competitors not managed to do it and you're going to be the one to do it? How do you fit that market? Now, you might be part of a very fast evolving market. There's a lot of emerging markets now that are on fire. And as regulations change, for example, CANA is a huge one. And investors are still on the fence about that, but more and more investments are being made, and we're going to see more and more of that. So what is your unique piece of the value chain for when the competition strikes? Why will you be the one that perseveres? So really understand the context. Don't forget, if you have any questions, if any of these terms are not familiar to you, please feel free to put it into the chat. Okay, so here, this to me is the silver bullet. When and I write investor presentations all day long, and I was sitting right here a couple hours ago with someone. I learned about a completely new market that I had not heard of before. It always surprises me when I learn new things. And when we got to the trends and the opportunities, or the urgency slide, which I have people put in, he was like, you know what? I never would have thought to put this in, and it's so important. So this is your chance to hit them with the FOMO train. So if anybody doesn't know what FOMO is, it's fear of missing out. Investors, particular Silicon Valley investors, suffer from FOMO. They never want to be the ones that didn't say yes to the next big thing, which is, again, going back to the beginning, one of the reasons that they don't actually say no to you. It's easier to disappear than it is to say no, because they might want to come back in. So why is now the time? Why is your product or solution or technology something that's time has come? What's the enabling factor? Are there market trends happening? Was there a regulatory change? For example, a couple years ago, I was working with a company that had a solution for GDPR. Now, at the time, and it's the European InfoSec regulation that went into effect 2 years ago. There's one coming down the pipes in California in a couple of months. Basically, now while all of you're getting all these update emails of we've updated our privacy policy, that's why. Legally, they have to make changes, and it's a massive undertaking, especially for financial institutions. And so a couple of years leading up to it, nobody really cared. Suddenly it was getting to the point where there were going to be major multi-billion euro fines for companies that were not compliant. So I had a client, they had developed this solution to instantly turn financial institutions GDPR compliant. Nobody cared. They were having a really hard time raising funds. And then suddenly, clock was ticking. Fast forward, the company was acquired for several tens of millions of dollars a couple of years down the road. So if you can show them that there's an emerging trend, a change in regulations, massive investments in your field, then you will definitely draw their attention to you. Create that urgency. Okay, so that's that for that piece. Any questions about the second piece, about the addressing the market and the trends, before we move on to the next one? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. If you have anything, please. Yes.
Hey, Donna, question.
Yes.
What was the name of that company? I may have to use them.
I can't disclose, but do some research and look for GDPR solutions that were acquired. You might just put two and two together.
Fantastic.
Okay, but they worked for major financial institutions. It wasn't just for individuals and small companies. There's probably a lot more startups coming out now with that kind of solution. Any other questions? Okay, great. So moving on, our next batch of comments is know your customer. So investors want to know that you know your customer, their needs, you know them inside out, and you know how to solve their needs as well. So you want to start off, and this is where storytelling really comes in handy. You need to draw them a very vivid picture of the pain of your industry, of the problem of your industry. And you don't want it to be trivial, like this is John. John's pain is blah, blah, blah. You want to elevate that a bit more and make it more sophisticated. I think that a really good way to do that, and I use this a lot with my clients, is to think of a user story somebody that's you've already working with. Where was their pain before you started? Kind of draw us a picture, especially if it's something in a very technical field, like for developers or IT or something that not everybody gets. So say, so this company, before we started working with them, was facing X, Y, and Z, and they were struggling to do this, and there were bugs, and there was downtime, and there was money loss. And this is happening across the industry. We're looking at an $8 billion problem. So really show that you understand the market in depth. And then you can come back and show how your solution solves those needs. And you can then, if you started with a user story, go back to the user story. And now that they're using you and they love you and their life is great and everybody's happy. Now, I want to caveat that by saying, don't spend too long on the problem. If you're speaking to tech-savvy investors, and if you're raising in Silicon Valley or New York, you probably are speaking to very tech-savvy investors and very smart investors. They get it pretty fast. So don't feel the need to go into this whole pain story. I also like it when people start with their own personal story that led them to creating this startup, because it's hard to argue when it was a personal pain or a personal passion. But once you kind of notice their body language, they get it, don't be afraid to just skip right to the solution. So don't make it too long. Leave them wanting to hear more. So as I said, you want to demo it through the customer journey. So when you create your demo, so here's the structure for your presentation. And so far as we've laid it out, you start with the problem, then you go to the solution. And once you've stated what the solution is, you want to show them how it works, what it looks like. You can walk them through the series of screenshots, a little video that you record, just an as if, let them see something and let them understand the user journey from the perspective of the user, of the main user. So if it's two-sided marketplace, always go from the side that's paying. That's the way you decide to show the product. Now, if there's also another user side, you could show that, but you want to get it down to 4 or 5 steps. Boom, boom, boom. This is what they did. This is what it looked like. Here's their results. Oh my gosh, look at how much better everything is since they started using it. And then if you can back it up with a glowing testimonial, then do that. Now, who is a customer? A customer is someone who pays you, okay? There were some instances where people, some of the startups presenting had slides with logos up. And what did the investors think automatically? Oh my gosh, Microsoft's a client of yours, Amazon's a client, that's amazing. And they're like, no. Either some said, oh, these are potential clients, or these are pilots, or these are partnerships. And they really harmed their credibility in doing that. So there's 3 things that investors are constantly listening for: credibility, likability, and momentum. So how well you know your stuff, what immense you are, and believe me, they look for that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And how far have you gotten? How much have you accomplished? So you need to have a good answer. If you have design partners or early stage clients and they're not paying you, they're going to want to know why, because that's a tough conversation to have. If you can't persuade people to pay for your value, how are you going to persuade investors to invest in you? So my suggestion is, even design partnerships, when they're getting value from you, be charging something. It doesn't have to be full price, but people value the things that they pay for too. So I mentioned before, getting testimonials, truly life-changing. You want to get the kind of testimonials from customers that say they can't imagine their life without you, that they're there for the long haul, their stickiness, because that's going to be what shows constant growth for you. And them telling the story is going to be much more powerful. And you can include it in your presentation and have a few of these champions ready, because anyone that's interested in investing in you is going to call on them in the due diligence process, and they're going to want to speak to them. So that's all for the Know Your Customers section. I see that I had a question on the chat. Let me take a look up there. And in the meantime, feel free to just chime in and ask some more. Okay. Idan, San Diego, when you say why you, many people have similar experiences, how do you truly stand out? Great one. So I am going to talk about competition a little bit later and how you talk about your competitive edge, but you need to show what's truly uniquely you. What do you have? What's your unfair advantage? What's your secret sauce that other people don't have? And if you can't identify it, you might have a problem. So yes, of course, there might be other people out there, there might be other players, but you've cracked the code, you've done it differently, you've got a unique technology, you've got IP, you've got someone on your team that's the industry expert. So really show what that unique edge is. I hope that addressed it, Idan. Any other questions about the Know Your Customer section? Okay, let's move on to the competitive landscape, which might give you some more insight then. So this is not what they want to see. It's kind of atrocious.
Sorry, Donna.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Donna. I was trying to ask a question. I was on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure.
No. So I think when it comes to knowing your customer, it's obviously very important to be extremely thorough. How do you determine how to research that? Because I think that you can Google a lot, or you can talk to people, you can talk to your customer face to face, but when you want to gather enough data to be able to say, here's what the market looks like,
yeah,
that's probably a challenging thing to do quickly.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's not an easy answer. I have a whole blog post that I wrote about getting your competitive, talking about your competition. You can find it on my website under resources, donnagriffith.com. And the same thing with your market research. Look, what you can't find on Google and you can't find in journals that might have these, sometimes there's paid studies that you have to find. You might want to hire a marketing agency that can do a thorough look at your competitive landscape and at your market and at your, you know, their needs. You might want to do some market research yourself. Somehow there's companies that could do it for you. You could do it yourself. Try to get knowledge from potential users beforehand. But we're talking several hundred for it to, or several thousand for it to actually make an impact. Okay, so it might be, try to get as much data as you can, digging the internet back and forth, upside, downside, but you might at the end have to hire an expert to do that. And I by the way, don't do that. I tell people what data to gather, and then they bring the raw data to me, and I cook it for them into a meal.
Wow.
I can't, you know, I don't do the research or the numbers. I'm a words woman. Okay, so going back to our competitive landscape. Yes, so this is, sorry, yes, more.
I have one more question about customers.
Yes.
You said that the customer is the one that pay, but what if the value that you actually create in your organization, in your product, is actually toward not the people who pay, toward actually people that the one who pays care for?
That might be, but at the end of the day, you're convincing someone to pay. You're giving value. That's wonderful. Maybe it's a B2B2C play, and that's fantastic. And maybe you have testimonials from that end. But at the end of the day, somebody's going to click that pay button or set up a subscription. And that's what investors care about at the end of the day, that you are drawing recurring revenue. It's the feel goods. People love your product, use it, adopt it, phenomenal. There might be a free side to it as well. You need to be able to show that people will pay for this, that they will either abandon what they're using now in order to move to your solution, or adopt this solution that's completely new and they've maybe never paid for it before. Okay. Barry. Okay, sorry, Barry, you joined a little late. I don't know, Barry wants to know if we're recording this. Ladies, gentlemen, are we recording this at all? No, we are. Dustin's recording, great. So anybody that joined late can ping Dustin and he will be happy to provide you with a recording, with a recap, and I'll also make sure to have my slides to send out. Fabulous, okay. Can I move on to competitive, or do we have any more customer questions? These are great. I love that you guys are bringing these things in. So, okay, once again, competition. How not to show your competition. Wrong. Okay, I always knew that investors hated this chart, but I never realized with which kind of vehement hatred they truly hated it. Like, literally, if looks could kill, the startups that put these up would have crumpled over and died. So nobody in a normal, non-bionic eyesight can, in one glance, understand anything like this. The same goes for the Harvey balls, which are the like half circle, full circle. Okay, do not do that. That is not a good way to show your competition. How do you show your competition? This is one, surprisingly, what was really funny, that a lot of the investors were really vehemently opposed to the Magic Quadrant or the 2x2 as well. They said it bores them, everyone has it, it always looks the same, your company at the top right. But what's funny is, then startups that didn't have it this way, they were looking for it, or somebody put like themselves on the bottom left corner and they were like, what? So they may be bored and they may say they hear it a lot, but at the same time, they're used to seeing it. So your job is to do it right, is to put, and by the way, this is a slide out of Airbnb's, one of their first fundraising decks. So they did it this way. So you want to put something that is truly differentiating in your X and Y. So really showing a true differentiation. So make sure the X and Y really speaks, otherwise there's other ways to show it. Another thing that they said they really like is the MarketScape. This is an IDC MarketScape. This is a bit complex to put together, but if you can show where you are and then, you know, where you plan to be up against the big guys, they said, you know, it's okay, show a little hubris, it's fine with us, we don't mind, as long as, you know, you can show us how you're going to get there. So, you know, here we are now, we're the little guy, we're the challenger, those are the big guys, and we intend to be up there by 2022. Okay, so that's another one, and yet another one, and this is my personal favorite. Oh, actually, no, one more, and then my personal favorite. This is, they said, you know what, sometimes it's good to just show us your competitors' logos. And like, okay, there you are in the center and there's all kinds of logos around you. So here they are. And this is what's unique about us as opposed to them. So first of all, just psychologically putting yourself bigger positions you bigger, but you can just kind of show that you have a true understanding of your competition. And now for my favorite, the petal diagram. Steve Blank came up with this one. He's a professor at Berkeley, just a genius when it comes to pitching and all kinds of things with investors. This is perfect if you compete with many different types of products. So here with Slack, when they first came out, they were competing with business communicating tools, collaboration tools, file sharing, unified communication, and task management. So there were 5 different realms, and as you see, some of them are in the crossover. So it's coming to say, listen, some of these we compete, some of these we complete, but we basically are touching on all of these different things, and we're a comprehensive solution. Again, you need to be able to prove this. And if you can keep people from using their other things and moving over to you, that's really the holy grail. And what's really, really, really important is to have a deep understanding of your landscape. And this touches again on, I think, Idan's question. So what really sets you apart? What do you do differently? You have to be 10x better, 10x cheaper, or 10x something to displace the current solution. So what is your brilliance? And what makes you so much better that leaves all the funded startups or historical solutions in the dust? And not just the big players, the impending startups that are there. So, I mean, you need to build it into your problem statement to begin with. Plant the seeds in the problem, showing that there's something missing in the competition, and then you come back and it's like you've set up bowling pins, and then boom, you knock it down. And feeding what your customers were saying that wasn't solved for them, and suddenly, boom, is solved for them. So they are telling the story and they're saying, you know what, we put out RFPs to all of our different vendors and couldn't get this solved. We couldn't believe that company X would be able to do it, and here they are. Here we are, we're just stunned. That's a testimonial that's worth gold. So they want to understand that you have, you know, a really deep understanding of the landscape and all its vectors, everything inside and outside. You never want to be caught not knowing something about a competition. And another thing that I want to say, and I know most of us on here are Israelis, are connected to Israel. I lived there for many years, so I'm allowed to say it. Somehow Israelis got the reputation of being a little bit negative about people, or a little bit arrogant. I have no idea how it happened. But one thing that's so important is, you know, you never want to diss or dismiss a competitor, or anyone for that matter. And I've heard very unfortunate conversations where people badmouth someone, and it's just painful. So, I mean, you can talk about your speed of execution. You could talk about how you compete with the Googles and Apples and the others, but don't ever dismiss and say, Google will never do it. I mean, that sounds ridiculous also. I mean, literally some guy said, we've got it covered, they're no match for us. And that shows that you're not taking your competition seriously. So never say anything negative about competition. What they're doing is great. What you're doing is great plus, plus, plus. So really, really be careful what you say, because one of the things they're going to be thinking is, wow, if they're bad-mouthing X competitor, X company, I wonder what they're going to say about me behind my back. And that you don't want. Okay, questions about the competitive landscape before we move on to our next bit. Feel free to chime in or to chat. Unmute yourself if you're trying to talk, otherwise we won't hear you. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Probably the second I move on, somebody will chime in, right? So the next batch of tips, and remember there's only, oh, there we go. I knew it. Okay, is the don't badmouth during Q&A. It could be during Q&A, but usually in an investor meeting, the Q&A is continuous. They don't wait till the end to ask questions. This sometimes, if it's like a pitch event or something, they will ask questions at the end. It could just be in conversation before or after the pitch as well. I've heard it happen in so many different settings. So I was at a gathering. There was a mishlachat of startups in from Israel, and they were, you know, meeting different figures. It was an icon. And somebody says, oh, do you know so-and-so? And the person's like, oh gosh, I can't stand them. And they actually were going to suggest making a connection between them because they thought it could be a potentially good partnership. And the person, I could see their face, it was just like, really? Oh, okay, yes, thank you, Mickey. That's a very important part. So do your homework on your VCs. Know who they're invested in. First of all, you shouldn't be meeting VCs that are invested in direct competitors. Most VCs have the integrity. Like I made an intro for one of my clients to a VC, and they wrote back in and they said, you know, for full disclosure, we're invested in X company. And I don't know if that's a conflict of interest. So I wrote my client back and she said, actually, no, they're not a competitor. They're more of a potential partnership. So I wrote him back and he said, great, make the connection. Not all VCs will do that because it's in their interest to see what's going on with competitors of their portfolio companies. If you've seen Silicon Valley, they had a very controversial term for what that is. I won't say it. Definitely be careful. You never know who's invested, who was on the board of, who had a niece or a nephew in that initial startup. Be careful. Just let's try to not badmouth at all. Any other questions about competition before we move on to design and format? Okay, so here is one area where I can tell you that looks do matter. For years, I have been telling my clients and people that come to my workshops that slides are a reflection of your product. I mean, literally, it's like we eat with our eyes, we take in information. So the first glance at your slides is also what they imagine your product looking like. And if your slides look crappy, that's what they're going to think of your product. Now, I was surprised, but like shocked at how much. I mean, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised at the level of an anti that investors had on slides that were packed full of bullets, not well designed, and you know, they said that if the slides are not up to par, if it doesn't match the aesthetic of the product, then you know, we just don't even want to look at it. So invest in, if you have a UI person, get them to make the slides look great, or a designer, a graphic designer. If you have the funds to hire a designer, great. I have some great designers I can connect you to. Otherwise, there's all kinds of great tools that are free that you can look up. They're either free or freemium. I'm gonna write it in the chat right now. So we've got Slide Bean, Slide Bot, Canva, Haiku, Deck. It's in the chat, so you guys can all look at it later. There's a, yeah, those are, eMaze, that's another one. That's actually an Israeli company. So there's all kinds of things that you can just instantly upload your slides and boom, it makes it look gorgeous. Some require a little bit more work. Most of them, if you don't pay, they'll have a logo powered by so-and-so. But it's a good solution. You should not just ignore the problem. That's the worst thing you can do, and say, it's a great product, they're not going to care about the slides. Again, something that I might or might not have heard Israelis say in the past. Here's another very important point. One big idea per slide. I get asked nearly every day, probably several times a day, well, so-and-so said to me I should have 10 slides or 12 slides. What's your take on that? And my take is, I would rather you not crunch all your ideas onto 10 slides and make it look like an eye chart. Maybe for your send out deck, your teaser deck, yes. There's absolutely no need for that. So my formula is one big idea per slide. I would rather you have, and I have on under my resources also, I have the ultimate cheat sheet for your investor deck or for your competition deck, for your sales deck. So each slide is its own idea. You might need several slides to show your demo, and that's fine. It's not that they're counting your slides. It's worse when it's teeny tiny print. One thing that surprised me also, a couple of the investors said, please number your slides, because later in discussion, we might say, please jump back to slide 8, and you want to easily be able to get there. They want to be able to note, taking notes where you're at. Speaking of the send out deck, have 2 versions of the deck. People are like, yeah, but what if I want to send it out? And you know, what if I want to leave it behind? People in the room should not want to commit suicide because you might want to send them your deck later. When we are sitting faced with a slide with 50 bullet points at 8-point font, we want to die. It's torture. It's maybe more torture, and that's poison by PowerPoint. So go ahead and create your presented version. Then you can choose like the 10 most significant slides, and you can add some text to the slides to make them a standalone that people can read, and then PDF it and send it out. So definitely keep 2 versions at least of your deck. So that's it for the design and format. Any questions about design and format? Okay, home stretch, everyone. It's almost dinner time, or maybe almost bedtime if you're on the East Coast. It's all about the people, and this is the element of the likability that I was talking about before. So I sat down with a VC partner one time, and because I'm always interested in hearing and learning more about their thought process, and he said to me that there's so many great companies that they see that there's not a problem to say yes. They could say yes all day. They're looking for the no's because there's so few and far between. So they're very, very strict on the no's. Like, he basically said that his biggest pet peeve was somebody looking at their phone while they were in the middle of the pitch, and they're like, that cancels it out. I've talked to other VCs that they have like a running scoring list for different things, personality, character traits, numbers, this, and they, you know, they mark it as they go along and then they tally it up together. So the way they see you behave in the meeting is the way they imagine you behaving in the business. So don't give them the reasons to say no. Don't give them the red slides. Here's another thing. Oh, don't make excuses. Something doesn't work, the screen's not working, the resolution is off, the sound is down, something's changed in the format. Don't say, oh, so sorry, okay, can I start again? First of all, they might not have noticed, okay? Second of all, if they did notice, it's making an even bigger deal of it. You can try to, you know, brush it under. But third, you should make sure that things work if they're crucial. Like there was a company presenting on a new sound technology they were going to be using in stadiums, and he had connected speakers to the computer and they weren't working. So you make sure they work, get there early, test them out if this is something crucial, or don't do a live demo, because live demos have a way of dying. So really be careful. Same thing with if you have something that's very visual, make sure you have a high-res screen that you have really great visuals as well. Here's another thing, and again, I'm sorry, Israeli companies, I've seen this happen before, and it's just painful to see. Don't argue a point with an investor. They might be asking a controversial question on purpose to see a response. But they're also, again, it's like dating. They're testing out what would our relationship look like under fire. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. There's going to be really lousy times. And if you're under pressure, under the pump, how are you going to respond? So sit there, take the feedback. You don't have to agree with it. Just be magnanimous. Thank you for that. And don't say but or no, because that cuts off what they said. If you say and, or in addition, I'd like to say, so it's like you're building on their point and you can add something in. But a lot of investors said, teach me something I don't know. If I can leave this meeting learning something new, then to me, that's an interesting company. So it's not arguing, don't let them imagine what their board meetings will look like in the future. And here's one of the golden nuggets that I was really, really surprised to hear, but I heard it from many investors. Never, ever, ever be in an investor meeting without a pad of paper and a pen or pencil, or a notebook of some kind. Not your phone, not your telephone, not your co-founder sitting there taking notes, okay? You could be writing gobbledygook, you could be doodling, but it's showing coachability. It's showing that you're listening. It's showing that you're there. They say it's like a visible accepting of their feedback. They need that visual cue. They need to understand. And I have to say that some of the most serious founders that I meet, even if it's just a casual meeting, they always have a notebook. And sometimes I'll just say things just, you know, even with friends that have startups, and they'll pull out the notebook and they'll write it down. So get in that habit of doing it. It really, really makes a difference. I don't care one way or another. If somebody wants to write a note on their phone or in their Keep, with me, I hate writing. But as they said, you know what? Crumple up the paper and throw it out afterwards. We don't care. Just show us that you're doing it. So that's all for it's all about the people segment. Any questions about the people part?
Yes. So obviously having connection, like creating the connection with the investor, how do you recommend that is the best way to create personal connection, or how personal you should go inside of this meeting?
I have another article on that on my website under resources on how to find investors. So you're welcome to look at that, but I'll give you a few pointers. Network is so important. This is why an organization like IAC or ICON or a lot of these organizations that are creating a network, especially for people that have come from another country that don't have a network here, that didn't go to school here. Everybody here has their alumni network. And so Network is super important. Get to know people, invest in relationships with people, because you never know where they'll be able to help. Be actively helpful. The best recommendations to investors are companies they've already invested in. So get to know people that have, if you, first of all, know your investors, do your research, see who are the investors that would be interesting to you. Nobody's going to do that research for you, and that takes a bit of work. When you've identified them, look at their portfolio companies and see if you could directly reach out or be introduced to one of their founders and create a relationship with them. Let them get to know you, let them mentor you, and let them then champion you. It takes time. Another way is through service providers like lawyers, accountants, myself. I mean, I'm happy to introduce my clients to investors that I've created relationships, but it's important to know that nobody's going to introduce you if we don't know you. Like, I'll get random emails from people on LinkedIn. Hi, we're coming to Silicon Valley. Can you introduce us to investors? I'm like, sure, let me just set aside all my work and do that right now. And it's your credibility on the line. So I will only send people that I have worked with, that I know their pitch is good, that I know they're serious. Otherwise, those investors are never going to want to hear from me again. And finally, there's cold emails. There are investors that will respond to cold emails, and then there are those that will not. It's worth giving it a try. I know many companies that have raised from cold emails. So those are kind of the top tips. Okay, Sapil wants to make sure that you're recording. Mickey says, before the presentation, practice, show up early, dress for success, make eye contact. I could not agree with you more. Practice truly does make perfect. Don't practice in front of a mirror. Practice in front of a camera or someone else, because watching yourself in real time is really tough. It's hard enough to watch yourself after. Okay, the raise. If you have any other questions, please pop them on. I know we're running low on time. I thought I had a full hour. You guys started 10 minutes late, so I'm going to steal those 10 minutes back. If you have to go, completely understand it. I'm going to go on. So looking at the raise itself. First of all, they say that, they say the proof is in the pudding, but here you've got a real heck of a pudding to cook. So you really want to be convincing, like we said, of everything that makes you better. Everyone today is saying that they're AI, machine learning, deep learning. That's not a real answer. You need to be able to prove that you really work. Technical proof, customer evidence, validating scientific or technological claims. You need to be able to show what stands behind the claims, because if they ask you, can you prove that, and you stand there hemming and hawing, it's not going to look very good. So clear numbers show that you warrant a higher investment and a higher valuation. What's the key business driver that's motivating your customers? Do they really consider this a problem that must be solved? So one of the investors said, when you're raising Series A and trying to prove product market fit, showing a big or small repeating customer that rely on your product is even more important than revenue. So even if you don't have a lot of revenues, showing repeat stickiness is super important. One thing I want you to be careful with is big blanket claims and statements and, things that are automatically going to raise their objection, and then they're going to sit there like, I don't believe you, I'm not listening to another bit. And then they're going to spend their time arguing with you in their brain rather than listening to you. Enterprise metrics. Let's just talk about that for a minute. So any of you out there that are selling to enterprise, we all know that there's a much higher bar for ARR there, and revenue is not the best metric because it takes a long time to close these sales cycles. So if you can show concrete, specific examples from partners or paying customers, how it works for them, how this has really changed their lives, changed the way they work, how they validate your claims, and they offer evidence. So this is truly important. So that's for all of you trying to show the enterprise metrics. Now there's always a question, okay, what round am I? Is this a seed? Is this an A? Is this an A plus, an A minus, a B plus? What is it? There's a lot of confusion about it, and it changes all the time. So some of the math that they do is pretty simple. So where should you be at after a sizable range? So if you've raised around $3 million in your seed round, which is a legitimate Silicon Valley seed round now, you should be able to show that you could get to 1 million ARR, and you should be able to prove it. Now, if you raise more than that, over 3 million, you need to get to much more, like 5 million ARR. So really be able to stand behind your claims and do the math. Like, don't reach too big and don't raise too much. So, I mean, how much should we raise? Some say don't raise 2x, more than 2x of your total revenue. That's a good benchmark. Sometimes startups will have raised a ton of money without any revenue at all, but you have commercial validation. So that's huge, the onus on you to then be able to prove, okay, you've got all this money, now you're going to be able to show us the results. And if you don't show the results, you're going to have a lot of trouble raising your next round. So that's what I have to say about the raise. And let me see, I had a question here in the chat. Okay, and all right. So the next and final section is looking ahead, your vision. So, oops, sorry. So we were just speaking about the round. A lot of the investors will have said, you know, when you're talking about this round, they're already imagining the next round because they have a responsibility. If they don't invest in you in the next round, that's a really bad signal for other investors. All right. So when see the quote on this the slide, once I write a check, I'm on the hook to help you raise your next round. Having clarity on what you're going to achieve in the next 18 months is super important for me to see how you'll raise your next round and how I'll onboard the best investors for you. They have to tap into their investor network and get people for the big mega rounds. So you need to talk about what your MRR will be, a clear roadmap, the KPIs you've already hit, and the KPIs that you plan to deliver. It's not fun and games. This is business. This is serious. So really set the KPIs, show how you've met your KPIs from your last raise, how you're going to meet these, have a legit roadmap. Again, milestones, KPIs, look 18 months ahead. What will you have achieved after 18 months? How much will you have burned? What's your ARR forecast, your customers, employees, users, expenses? And then you can work backwards and see where will your various milestones be? What will your burn rate be? I mean, it's based on assumptions, but it's a little bit more clear than saying, oh, we're going to have 20 million ARR by year 5. Don't just throw out blanket numbers. Do your homework so they really know this is serious. Now, let's get real for a second. Not all companies are VC investable. VCs want to see products that are repeatability of income. It's not just a one-time purchase. You might have a phenomenal business that's a lifestyle business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that you could be making incredible money off of, but it's not VC interesting. They want a 10x return, or at least. They want money flowing in. So if you're getting a lot of no's and saying this is just not big enough, don't think that there's something wrong with you. You just might not need an investment, and get as far as you can before you seek an investment. Anything you can do to survive. Another thing they want to look at is your proxy for revenue, they call it. What's your daily active users, your weekly active users, your monthly active users, how you're going to continue to grow and bring revenues. Show these numbers. So what's the allocation? What are you going to be spending money on? They really want to know the details so that they understand that you're going to be covered and not be raising funding in another 6 months. They want you focused on growing your business. They don't want to see you out raising funding for at least another 12 months. That's why you're raising them for 18 months, because then after a year, you want to go out and start raising with another 6 months of runway there. Exit strategy. Now, this is a tricky one because you don't want to spell it out in the slide and say, here's our exit strategy. Don't do that. However, they're going to ask you, they're going to be imagining, okay, I need to envision Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, where are you going? So even if you fail, will there still be a nice exit? Will I still get some of my money back? So if they ask you what's your exit strategy, your first answer should be, oh, we're focused on building a great company now. We are not thinking about that. We're looking at it for the long haul. And they'll be like, oh yeah, well, if you push my back to the wall, I can either imagine a scenario where so-and-so would find us as an attractive exit because ABC, or we'd go the IPO route. But again, right now that's so far off. Let's focus on building a great company. Again, they want to know how you're going to answer that. And if you look under the resources of my website, there's also a list of the top questions that VCs ask. So you can kind of look at that list and prep yourself. Okay, so just to summarize, and then I'll be happy to take some more questions. One of the most powerful quotes that I've heard from a VC is, people are someone we want to be in business with. The market must excite us, what you have accomplished and how well do you think you're executing. Technology does play a role fast, but I have to believe the team can take me to a $400 million outcome. So it's your technology, it's your product, but it's also you as a leader and how you are capable of taking them there. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you got some good tips. I'm happy to take some questions. If you have any further follow-up questions, this is my contact information. I'm more than happy to talk to you. Thank you. Questions?
Yes, I have one.
Hi, Guy.
How are you? So personally, what I do, I don't have a specific product, and I don't have. It's kind of it's a pseudo product meets service. I develop TV shows and films, and the company, we have a secret sauce that I'm not at liberty to really say it out loud, but really for out to the public, we say that, we produce content with purpose. And when you talk about know your customer, so obviously, for film and TV, it truly means the world. How many people live on Earth? The other customer that I might think about is the people that, we're trying to develop for and sell it to. So, I can look at the customer either as an audience member, or I can look at it as kind of like a Netflix, a Hulu, an Amazon.
Yep. You've got two potential customers in there. Again, the main one that's going to concern investors is the one that's paying you.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the Netflix, the Hulu. The end user doesn't know about you. You're just the creator of the content. They're just consuming the content. As far as they're concerned, it's Netflix, right?
Okay.
Did that answer?
Yeah, it did. And then the follow-up to that was,
yes.
Which is the toughest one that I've encountered up to now. Are you VC and Investable? Generally, it's, I'm in an area that is very high risk. Most investors shy away from the entertainment industry. They rather just go play roulette in Vegas. They might have a little bit more fun with that.
Is that true, Vegas people?
But just kind of wanted to see if maybe that's a private conversation we have or something you can kind of chime in.
All I can say is I always tell people, if you can tap out all the resources, grants, loans, rich aunts and uncles, friends and family, before you give away equity to get as far as you possibly can, you will have more leverage and you'll have a better chance of raising. And hey, maybe you'll start generating revenue and not have to raise. I love nothing better than the stories of the people that have become majorly successful cash cows and growing companies without raising a cent of VC funding. And I know a few of them personally. So I'd say try to get as far as you can. People look at VC investment as like, oh my God, such success. It's a good milestone. It's something to celebrate, but it's not the end all be all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, pleasure. Any other questions? Okay, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank you. And I want also to say that I don't have a startup like Silicon Valley startup. I have a nonprofit that is in a lot of the, it's in the beginning. And I could really take a lot from what you just shared into
good.
it.
I'm so glad. I'm really glad.
So it's relevant to a lot of things.
Yeah. Good, thank you. I'm glad that worked. The storytelling webinar that I usually do, well, I'll be happy to come back, but that'll be even more relevant, I think. Other questions, comments, concerns, criticisms?
Yeah,
okay,
thank you again. I mean, from my perspective too, we're in a spot right now. We started a company 6 years ago, and we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Allegiant Airlines, and we're now on the market to be sold. So we're talking to different investors, different companies that are looking to acquire us. So a lot of this is extremely relevant.
Fabulous. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. And if you guys want to get a recap, also, again, under resources, there's the 2 blog posts that I wrote that kind of summarize this, that I drew the context for this webinar from. So Secrets from the Boardroom 1 and Secrets from the Boardroom 2. So feel free to tap into those as well, and I'll be happy to send the slides out. Okay, guys, I'm going to go have dinner with my girls.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Donna. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good night wherever you are.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Guys, before, thank you very much to Donna. Before we hang up, I just want to give you a quick heads up for our next Edge webinar. That will take place on February 25th. We will send the details and information and the flyers and everything so you can save the date. It's gonna host Ariel Halevi. He's the co-founder at the Viomar, The Power of Being Heard. So stay tuned, February 25th, save that date. We'll send more information soon. And I also want to take a minute to thank you very much. And all of you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. אהלן ניב. מה העניינים? רק עכשיו ראיתי. Good to see you. Thank you guys. Have a great night everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. You have to go.
אז אני רואה עידן שאתה וניב התחברתם.
כן, אני מכיר את ניב.
יופי. זה הזמן להתחיל לחמם מנועים ולצאת לדרך.
מה קורה, ניב? Yes.
תגיד לי, ניב, איך קורה שכולם מכירים אותך?
ניב, איך אנחנו... ניב, איך אנחנו... שאלתי עכשיו. איך אתה מכיר את כולם?
דסטין, אפשר כבר לא להקליט.
נכון, תודה.